Thanks, Amira, and thanks, Gemma, and of course, thanks, Rachel, for setting out the introduction. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we manage concerns, otherwise known as fitness to practice. And what I will say from the outset is those of you on this webinar are highly unlikely um, to come into contact with the GPhC in relation to fitness to practice. That is probably a little bit reassuring. But what I will do, and again, it's very, very useful to know about how we do manage concerns because it's good to know that the support that's there. It's good to know how it can actually support you in avoiding fitness to practice, in actually addressing concerns before they become bigger issues. And some of what Amira said feeds into that too, particularly around professionalism and things like that. So I'll talk a little bit about to set the context. I'll talk a little bit about the concerns that we receive and where they come from and what we do with them. And then I'll talk a little bit more in detail about how we approach them, how we approach the concerns, how we manage them, the different phases, and then the support that's available. All of this information is available on our annual report, which is on the website. But the source of the concerns, overwhelming majority from members of the public, and that sort of speaks to the kind of setting and the environment within which pharmacy professionals, technicians, pharmacists operate in the pharmacies and the like. But of course, other healthcare professionals, employers will also make referrals and importantly, self declarations. And the majority of those are around health concerns, but also cautions and convictions. And very important that we want people to have the confidence to self declare health concerns to us because it's not an automatic removal, as some people sort of might think whenever they refer to fitness to practice. There's certainly tools that can help you manage any health condition. And the outcomes of the concerns concluded in 23, 24. Again, in a bit more detail, I'll talk about the kind of phases, but we have initial assessment and investigation. Again, you'll see here the vast majority get concluded these stages, particularly initial assessment, which is the team that comes in, has an initial look at the concern, and then says, is it something we'll investigate? Significant drop off in numbers there from what we receive to what we investigate. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do see at all those stages in a bit. We also have the more formal, more serious fitness to practice stages, and we have the investigating committee, which concluded 34 concerns, warning, letter of advice, no further action, or of course the one that you might be more familiar with, as it is majority of these are held in public and are the ones that receive the most sort of attention and are more high profile, and that's the Fitness to Practice Committee. Almost 70 concerns concluded last year. Those serious concerns will be suspension from the register, anything up to 12 months, conditions, but also the removal, which is you're struck off effectively. And that happened to 13 professionals last year. Again, pharmacy technicians, the proportion of this is quite low. I think there was about two pharmacy technicians removed from the register last year. So, what comes to mind when you hear the term fitness to practice? I heard Amira say earlier there about the punitive nature of it. Of course, it isn't punitive, but there is a perception around it being punitive. But these are the kind of things we've done a number of pieces of research, and there was a group of pharmacy technicians, and they thought that these pictures were quite that the person was the professional, and this was the GPhC, quite perceived to be quite scary, and bit of a power dynamic difference there, and that people tended to close themselves off if there was a concern raised about them. Another one here, of course, this is the GPhC on the left with the pharmacy professional on the right. That sort of big bad scary power difference as well. A couple of things that we did as well was ask people what they thought. Stress, anxiety, worried, unsure. A lot of these words do come through quite a bit, and that's why we're looking a little bit more about how we can be person centered because there's people involved in every concern, and we want to treat them as people, not as a number. And we do a lot of work around that that I'll sort of touch on as well. So some key points there before we go into the kind of nuts and bolts. It's not there to punish people, although it actually may seem that way. And of course, if somebody does something incredibly serious, a lot of the sexual misconduct concerns, a lot of the serious violent convictions, they will be removed from the register in all likelihood. And therefore, that may be a punishment and may be perceived as a punishment. And the impact maybe to punish people, but that's so we can protect patients and the public. And its purpose, there's significant purpose, and the sole purposes are to protect the public. And having a concern raised about you does not necessarily mean that you'll be removed from the register whatsoever. As we've demonstrated from the numbers, very, very low number indeed to get removed. If you're looking at about 5,000 concerns that we managed in 23-24, 13 removed, 27 suspended. So a very low proportion. Regulator is there to support professionals when and where we can. It's important to engage if you have a concern raised about you. Research shows that engaging and being represented can result in a less serious outcome. So how do we manage them? And this is, I talk about managing concerns, which is softer language, but it's fundamentally the same thing, fitness to practice. And it's about, you may not be fitness to practice if your behavior is putting patients at risk, practicing in an unsafe way, or the health may be affecting their ability to make safe judgments about patients. So it can range from anything in your personal life around cautions and convictions to issues in your practice, a series of dispensing errors or being incredibly reckless that resulted in harm to patients, or a significant health concern that has got very serious. The professional doesn't demonstrate any insight and it affects their practice. All of that can lead to a fitness to practice issue. What we do investigate, significant number, an overwhelming number of concerns that we get are around dispensing errors, labeling, straightforward dispensing errors with the wrong medication, delivery issues, things like that. People working under the influence of alcohol and drugs within the dispensary does happen. Sexual misconduct, another one that we've seen a significant rise in. Criminal conduct, fraud, theft, whether it's in your private life or with regards to the NHS, and dishonesty as well. What we don't investigate, claims for compensation, customer service issues, prescription charges, contract issues, and non-medicinal products. We do receive a number of concerns in relation to those, and those do get closed quite quickly. A couple of examples of serious concerns. I'll not go into these in detail. I mentioned working under the influence of drink or drugs, and of course, people accessing drugs in a dispensary, which can impair their ability to practice safely. Dispensing errors, if serious or repeated, majority of one-off dispensing errors won't result in an FTP issue if there are no aggravating issues. But if there are a number of serious ones, if they are repeated, then that shows a pattern of behaviour that hasn't been addressed and can lead to us opening an investigation. So the kind of general approach that we take from a procedural point of view, I mentioned those four stages. You have initial assessment, majority of concerns are concluded there once we receive them. Investigation, which is a number of teams there and case officers that do a more in-depth look, gather evidence, interview people, receive information from the police. They then refer to an investigating committee if it is appropriate to do so. And the investigating committee in turn will go to an FTP committee if it is serious enough. There are, of course, interim orders for very, very serious issues. If someone has committed a crime or has been convicted, there is direct referral, which can expedite concerns straight to an FTP committee as well. And of course, the seriousness increases as you go through all of those stages. So not only are you unlikely to come to fitness to practice, you're highly, highly statistically unlikely to go to any of the latter stages in the committee. So what do people expect from us? I said at the beginning that we want to treat people, be a little bit more person centered and treat people um, properly and appropriately and professionally as we go through the various stages of fitness to practice. And, once a concern's raised, whether you're the person that's raised the concern or the professional that has had the concern raised about them. We want to treat everyone as an individual. We recognize the human impact because that those that have a concern raised about them, it can have an impact on their mental health or worry. I mentioned those words earlier that we spoke about, the anxiety. We do understand that, and people have families as well. So we want to ensure that we listen, understand people's needs, and be responsive to them. We've developed a number of service promises that are all available on our website that we adhere to whenever we're managing the concerns that come through to us. Again, the support for pharmacy professionals. My colleagues mentioned a number of these things, the standards and guidance. Again, these are the things, that people should, that they aspire to achieve and also go beyond. And there's associated guidance for all of these that set out the kind of expectations that we would like professionals to demonstrate. And there's guidance on raising concerns and maintaining clear sexual boundaries. And the one previously mentioned, demonstrating professionalism online. We are seeing an increase in concerns of that nature, obviously, with the continuing evolution of social media and, of course, the kind of issues in the world at the minute. Again, the toolkits around being open and honest, very important to be open and honest. For example, a dispensing error that's relatively low level and may not be an FTP issue, but if you conceal it, if you deny it, if you're trying to sort of say it didn't happen, then that can aggravate a simple, straightforward issue that wouldn't call into question your FTP. So there's a number of behaviours around the kind of issues that arise with us that we look into. We do have FAQs and a glossary of terms to help people understand what it is we do. We do have advice and support for pharmacy professionals. We do have literature. We have voluntary agreements. Those can help people with health concerns to sort of stay on any treatment program. If you ever do get involved in an FTP issue, we will speak to you about voluntary agreements and whether they would be suitable for you. Of course, if you want to know more about the kind of real detail about fitness to practice and about our approach, the good decision making documents. Of course, the one that's missing off there is around initial assessment, because that's the most recent one that was developed last February. These three documents, in addition to that, set out everything that can happen at each stage and our power to do it, and the kind of things committees and we as an organisation take into consideration when making our decisions. So the sort of key points then, just to finalise, engage with the GPhC at all times. We know that people do be impacted by it and tend to sort of cut themselves off. But the problems don't go away. If you do engage, it will be resolved. And as I say, being engaged and representing and seeking advice does actually help with the general outcome. Be open and honest when anything does go wrong. and demonstrate insight, which means an understanding about what has happened, and a clear sort of understanding about the circumstances, and that can also really, really help whenever you if you ever do go through fitness to practice. And of course, our new enhanced and excellent website is available to find out more about our approach and anything that I've spoken about this evening.